The McDonnell Douglas KC-10A Extender is a modified DC-10 airliner that entered service with the United States Air Force in 1981, originally with the Strategic Air Command. This particular airframe, 830078, has a significant history with Australia. In 1984, it helped ferry the first pair of A-18B Hornets from Leemore in California to Williamtown in New South Wales to start their service with the Australian Air Force. During 1987, 78 returned as part of the contingent that was the visit by the United States Air Force Thunderbirds aerobatic team. In 2011, she once again graced our shores as an exhibit at the Australian International Airshow at Aviation. The KC-10A is due to be retired in the middle of next year, so we're very fortunate to be able to see the KC-10A Extender in Australia for maybe the last time. Aviation Spotters Online was very fortunate to spend some time with the crew. There are a number of interviews we'd like to share with you now, and hopefully you enjoy watching it as much as we enjoyed filming them.
Sergeant Moore from the KC-10 6th Air Refueling Squadron out of Travis Air Force Base, and we're going to talk a little bit about the KC-10 pre-flight. We usually start here at the front. We'll check out usually the pitot tubes up here, make sure the radome, all the skin of the aircraft is good, there's no dents, there's no problems. We'll work back, check all of our static air vanes, and move along, making sure there's nothing that's clogged up, making sure everything looks like it's secure and in place. We'll walk in usually and check out the nose gear, walk around, check all the tires, make sure there's no cuts, no slashes, make sure everything's serviceable for flight. Then we'll move on back down the side of the aircraft and we'll work on checking all our static ports, making sure our doors are sealed, ready for flight, make sure they're armed so that if an emergency happens we can get off the aircraft safely. Then we'll move back and inspect. We'll usually have the fuel pumps on. We'll make sure that we can hear the fuel pumps running, make sure there's no leaks, make sure that's all running correctly. And then we'll check all of our flight control surfaces. We'll walk around our engine. We'll check inlet, exhaust, make sure everything that we have there is in proper order and moving freely. If it's not spinning, we're just making sure it's there, making sure there's nothing that looks like it's clogged up in there, nothing's built a nest or anything like that. Then we'll move back and keep going along the wing here. Again, checking flight control surfaces, making sure there's no screws loose or anything that looks out of place that shouldn't be there. Looking for any leaks again. Then we'll take, at the very edge of the tip, we'll look at all of our static lightning dischargers and make sure they're all in place and in order, and checking all of our lights to make sure they're working before flight. As we move around the back, we're going to keep looking at all our flaps and slats, making sure they're all there in place, that the hydro's keeping them in place. And then we'll move around to our main gears where we're going to check our brakes, our tires again. We're also going to look for any leaks on our hydraulic actuators on those to make sure that they're going to retract properly when we take off. After that, we'll also check on the very center underbody of the KC-10. We have all our drain ports for our fuel system and make sure that any of the overflow or drain valves aren't leaking from there as well. Making sure that we're not going to lose any fuel in flight. Last, we'll come all the way back and circle around our boom pod and boom, making sure that it's up stowed, make sure there's no leaks. Usually we'll have the APU running as well. We'll make sure that's not leaking and get just a good picture of all of it, make sure there's nothing in the boom, making sure the drogue is stowed and ready for flight. And then we'll check the tail engine. Same thing, looking for security, making sure all the doors are shut, making sure all the panels are fastened. And then after that, we move around to the opposite side. We're going to be looking at pretty much the same things, but there are a couple differences on the other side of the aircraft and then this side of the aircraft. Once we get over there, I'll show you the cabin outflow valve and some of the other equipment that's on that side that's not on our aircraft side over here. Other than that, we're usually checking our lights, our formation lights, making sure they're lit up or good to go, especially for night flights, so that our partners and fighters can know where we're at when it's low visibility. Right now, you can actually see our booms down for the air show, so you get to see a little bit more of what it looks like. The nozzle is usually one of the things we'll walk back and make sure that there's nothing sticking in there for making sure it's not going to mess with the fighters and any of their air receiving. Over here again, we're just looking for the skin of the aircraft, making sure it all looks smooth, making sure there's no dents, no wobbles, nothing's happened that put too many G's on it and may make it unsafe for flight. Here again, we get a little bit better picture of the wing. You can see some of our drain ports and some of our fuel lever indicators underneath here. If for some reason something happens, we can always check those for the fuel levels of our tanks before flight if our indicators in the cockpit aren't working. And then around here, the last big things we're going to check is normally we'll check our cargo door and make sure it's secured for flight, as well as you can see right about there is our cabin outflow valve, which is what controls our pressurization. We'll inspect that, as well as re-inspect the engine on this side, making sure all the panels are fastened and everything else. And then once we get to the front of the aircraft, there's only a couple small things we're checking, like our oxygen servicing system has a little green disc and a retaining clip that we need to make sure is in there. And then we're making sure that our pack doors for our air conditioning system are secured and fastened. And outside of that, just checking lights and skin of the aircraft.
Yeah, sure. My name is Captain Kevin Cabisora. I'm a pilot on the KC-10 in Air Refueling Aircraft. We're all in the 6th Air Refueling Squadron. Got one pilot over here in the 9th Air Refueling Squadron, based out of Travis Air Force Base. Right now we're going to show you how to pre-flight run some checklists.
Alright guys, when you're ready?
Yep.
Alright, today's takeoff's based off of 410,000 pounds. V1, we're going to have 120, 135, 145, 157, 187, and 210. Takeoff down and 1 limit V-bugs.
Check set pilot. Check set co-pilot.
Check set flight engineer. Altimeters 29er, 9er, 9er.
29er, 9er, 9er, set twice pilot. 29er, 9er, 9er, set co-pilot.
Set engineer. FMS on you, present position flight plan.
Loaded pilot. Loaded co-pilot.
Check flight engineer. Oxygen systems.
On 100 pilot. On 100 co-pilot. On 100 go.
On 100 engineer. Compasses.
Slave pilot.
Slave co. Winch on that ISD fog.
Normal on.
Pitot heat.
Tack.
Exterior lights.
Set.
Set flight engineer. preparation completed. 4 start when you're ready, sir.
4 start.
I and use.
Nav pilot. Nav co-pilot.
Nav engineer, beacon light selector.
Both.
Parking brake.
Set.
Fuel levers.
Off.
Engine ignition selector.
First aid. Start A.
Good rise. Boom operators prep.
Completed.
Before starting in, checklist complete.
Okay, so can you just tell us a little bit about your story about how you went through pilot school and was the KC-10 your first choice?
Yeah, I'll make it nice and brief. So, my name's Kevin Cabisora. I'm a pilot in the United States Air Force. The reason why I wanted to fly actually was a lot like events like these, seeing air shows. So, I was in Seattle in the United States at Space Needle, right on my dad's shoulders, watching the Blue Angels go do a demonstration. And at that point, I knew that I wanted to go and fly. So my route over there, just worked real hard at school, got to the Air Force Academy over in Colorado, did 4 years of training over there, at which point I got my pilot slot, and then did an additional about 1.5 years of training down in Texas for pilot training school. When it came time for my preferences and what the needs of the Air Force was, that's how I ended up with the heavy track, so your cargo, your refuelers. At the end, I had to go in for my preferences, and I put the KC-10 to Travis first. So a little bit of history, I actually ended up over at McGuire, which is on the east coast of the United States first. I just moved over to California about 3 months ago. I love it. It was my first choice because I've been a fan of fighter jets since I was a kid, as I said. But just going through, just kind of lost interest in going and flying with them. It wasn't kind of my lifestyle, not my personality. I wanted to go fly with a crew and go travel but still get to work with those fighter planes. So doing the tanker mission, it's a great opportunity to go and work closely with these great aircraft that I loved as a kid, and it just never stops being enthusiastic about it.
And with the eventual retirement of Big Sexy next year, what's your next aircraft of choice? Will you stay in the tanking community or are you going to move on?
Right, so I'm going to try to stay with the tanker community as much as I can. I'm currently stationed over in California and would like to keep it that way. So we are transitioning over to the KC-46, as you can see right behind me. That's going to be the next tanker that's replacing this current tanker. So my goal is to go transition over there, learn that new weapon system, and continue being a tanker pilot.
And so for any young kids watching this, what advice would you give them if they have any aspirations or dreams of becoming a pilot?
So besides my usual advice of study hard and listen to what your parents say, I would say try to see if you can find some kind of mentor, somebody you can look up to. Go to these air shows, go try to find some pilot that's doing this, ask them about their story, how they went through, get their advice. I never thought that I would get over here when I was a 5-year-old kid, and I just had really good mentors around me that showed me the way. Favorite jet to go see for refueling? There's quite a few. I'm always just thrilled when I see those F-22s just come in. It just looks like a spaceship still, You go right up front of them, you see that they're a normal airplane. They still got the normal pitot tubes, the flaps, but just from far away, it just still looks like it's the future, doesn't it? Yeah, so that's still to this day my favorite. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Senior Airman Zach Oven with the 6th Air Refueling Squadron, Travis Air Force Base, California. If you look at the top of this window here, you're going to see the air refueling boom that we use to refuel other aircraft. On my right hand side here, I'm going to have a flight control stick that maneuvers the boom up, down, left, and right. And then on my left hand side here, I'm going to have my telescope stick that actually extends and retracts the boom itself. I have 3 gauges in front of me that displays where the boom is situated in relation to its limitations. And then below me, I have a window that when McDonnell Douglas developed the DC-10, it was a commercial airliner that was eventually transformed into an air refueling tanker. And when they did, they installed this window beneath my feet that has 2 mirrors on the fuselage that point to each wing. So whenever we're refueling multi-formation fighters, we can see them on our wingtips. And then on the left-hand side here is just an observer seat right hand side is going to be the instructor seat, and it's going to be a mirror image of the boom operator setup. So the telescope stick is actually going to be on the right hand side, and we have a shared flight control stick in the middle between us, just so whenever we fly with students, it is as safe as possible.
What would you say to people who are younger than yourself, wanting a career in the Air Force? What would you say to them to get to where you are?
So actually, I enlisted when I was 18, so fresh out of high school. I believe it was like 2 weeks after my graduation before I entered the Air Force. And in the grand scheme of things, it's a little surprising that they would let an 18-year-old operate multi-million-dollar aircraft. But I've learned a lot of skills that the military has provided me through professionalism. Obviously, I'm very blessed to have this job. Not only do I get to travel and be a part of something that's bigger than me, but I've always wanted to serve my country. So I think the military has a lot of benefits, and everybody has the choice of education and trades, but the military is an awesome career path that helps develop you as a person as well, even if you are not planning for a career in the military.
What's something you look at there and go, I really like looking down at that particular aircraft?
I love our whole fighter fleet, and it's hard not to say the beautiful KC-10, because that's one thing that's unique about it, is that not only are we a tanker, we can also receive fuel as well. But I'd have to say the B-2 is probably the most beautiful, mind-blowing aircraft that you can see in that window, and it takes up a large amount of that window.